probably not going to believe this, but I'm going to tell you a story about 3 months ago. I went to a plastic surgeon, and what sparked me to want to tell y'all about this is that a friend of mine said that she was getting ready to go to a plastic surgeon and see about having a little work done. And I said, "Well, please don't go to this guy." And she said, "Huh?" I said, "I went to a local plastic surgeon in Alabama." And when I got there, I was quite excited. I knew that if I chose to do this, it was going to cost $7,000. And instead of going on a nice vacation, I thought this is going to be, I'm go without vacations this year so I could have this done. And when I got in there, I was quite excited about having it done. I really was quite excited about this. And so I thought, I'm going to go in, I'm going to get a consultation. He's going to tell me, show me, and schedule, and we're going to move forward with this. Well, it was for an upper eye bleph, this over this hang, this, to have this smoothed out and tightened, what have you, an eye lift. And so I get in the office and I sit down in the little examining room, and he and a nurse come in, and he looked kind of scraggly, like he had a day's worth of beard growth. He hadn't shaved yet. He looked like he had not, like maybe he worked all night in the emergency room, that sort of look. And I was a little off with that, but to each his own. And then he got to talking, and he said, "Yeah, we could do this." And he touched my face, and the nurse is there. She's writing stuff down. He's like, "Okay." And he said, "There's some risk involved." And I said, "Yes." And I'm prepared to hear all the risk about anesthesia and this and that, right? He says, and he says it with a laughing, "You're going to have black eyes." And I said, "Black eyes?" I said, how severe?" And he said, "Oh, it'd probably be pretty bad." And I said, "Oh, well, what is the average recovery time?" "Oh, I don't know. It can change for everybody, but yeah, you're not going to be able to see for a few days." And yeah. And everything else he talked about medically, clinically. This is, we'll cut here, we'll do this. He was very clinically, which I was impressed with his conversation, up until he started talking about me having black eyes. And he got such a tickle, a thrill out of it. And I said, "Does everyone get black?" "Oh, well, if I do it." Yeah, if I do it. So it wasn't what he was saying, it was how he was saying it. If he'd have said, "Unfortunately, most or many people do get black eyes, so there's going to be a recovery time," had he given that same information in a kinder way, I would have went, that's just the side effect. That's the consequence of having this done. But because he was getting kind of a tickle out of it, it made me feel like he was going to intentionally be extra rough, abusive kind of behavior, it felt like. Now, I'm not telling you that this plastic surgeon was abusive. I'm telling you that that's what it inspired in me, to feel like I'm talking to a man who gets a thrill out of women suffering. So now I'm just sitting there, and the more he's talking, the more I don't need an eye lift, because I'm like this listening to it. And he says, "All right, well, you want to see some pictures?" I said, "No, I think I've heard enough." "Oh, well, look, we can show you some." I said, "No, I think I've heard enough." And I didn't have any kind of a pissing contest with him. I simply just said, "I think I've heard enough." "Well, no, see, we'll show you some pictures so you can see the result." "No, no, I don't think this is for me." And it wasn't that this isn't for me, it was, "You're not for me." Ladies, just because you go to a doctor, just because he has a degree, doesn't mean he's not also a jackass. So I shared this story with my friend, and she was like, "I have an appointment scheduled with him." I said, "Okay, well, that was my experience. Maybe he was just having an off day, but that was my personal experience." A couple days later, she says, "I went to them." She said, "I got the same feeling. I got the same vibe." I said, "I hope that my story didn't taint it." She's like, "No, he gave me that vibe too." So I, of course, as you know, I have not had the eye left lift. I've not done that. But if I do, it will be with someone with some kindness and compassion. And sharing this because a lot of the women my age, I'm 58 years old, I'm closer to 59 than I am 58. And when I do have something done, some work done, it is going to be with someone with some kindness and decency that I feel safe with. And that really needs to go over. You need to trust your gut. And I'm sharing this because I want everyone to just trust your gut. You can politely say no and leave. Don't do something so dramatic to your body. And I'm all for some plastic surgery. I mean, my wallet's not all for it, but I personally, I'm all for it. Do you, boo? I'm all good with that. There's no judgment. I think you should do whatever makes you happy and makes you feel good about yourself. But don't do it with a surgeon that you don't have faith and trust and you're not getting the right vibe with just because they have a degree. And that kind of goes across the board with all things, but men, shitty men have jobs too. You know what I mean? Have you ever experienced something like that where you think, just because he's a professional at this career, he still seems a little off? Yes, girls, sometimes they're a little off, and you need to really trust your judgment on that. Trust your gut. Say no, thank you, and leave.